Let me just begin with a little bit of context about what's happening in the marketplace from an advertiser investment standpoint. You heard consistently on the last panel about instability and job changes, and it's part of the process. Here are the numbers according to another holding company, which will not be mentioned. Advertising and news in the UK has declined a staggering 56% in the last 10 years. 56% down in GBP. It will decline another 13% by their forecast by 2027. That's a 70% decline in ad revenue in 13 years' time. Think about other businesses. Have you ever heard anything like that? This is monumental. And it's also, as you saw from the research that Mark shared, really kind of ridiculous when you think about the primary driver of that, which is fear of the boogeyman, fear of being associated with content that is unsavory and might upset someone. And frankly, marketers are leaving money on the table, missing an enormous opportunity to reach probably one of the most influential and affluent audiences out there. And it's completely fact-free. So let's get right into that. Tina, the first question is for you. You're in a unique position, having worked across such a strong range of client genres in your career, and have a tremendous understanding of the changes that have happened in the marketplace. You've seen the evolution of investment across channels as there's been more and more channel proliferation. More than ever, marketers are being asked to justify where budgets are going. Bearing that in mind, what we just listened to and what we learned from the study, what guidance do you have to brands today about the value of investing in news while managing more performance-based channels?
Thanks, Lou, and hi everybody. So I'm a marketing procurement consultant. So I've got a marketing procurement view. So it isn't just all about cost, but for me, it's working with clients and it's working with their agencies to actually understand what the investment in news can bring. I think there's been obviously various studies, the Stagwell one, for example, Newswork. There's a study I read in prep for this. The IPA data banks about actually invested in news does increase profitability, et cetera, So for me, clients need to get that balance of that long-term view of investing in news. I've got a couple of clients actually that are doing partnerships with like the FT, and the reason they're doing it, 2-3 years time, they actually want to sort of sell, and actually they realise by having a partnership, with someone like the FT can build the brand. They know that, put the brand safety, we know the target audience, we want to focus on the CEOs, they're influential, but at the same time it's getting that balance of performance metrics, so actually using the data and tech to actually have that short-term effect as well. So I would say to any sort of clients, and say I'm not a media strategist, but actually I would say to the CMOs with budgets, I know Mark's got a slightly different view, but actually having that balance of that investment in investing in news, but actually from a performance, having that short-term investment as well to get the increase in sales, etc., while building the brand.
I love that answer. I ran media for Bank of America globally and American Express before that, and every plan we ever did with news performed very, very well. And I think marketers should test into news because there's a lot of unduplicated reach now because they're not advertising in it. So it's new audiences. So I love that answer. We'll go all the way down to the other end of Ross. As someone who's worked with government, I have no doubt navigated some interesting communications chapters at Network Rail. How would you suggest ways that supporting paid journalism can enhance a brand's reputation and credibility in the long term, especially when solutions are often looked at through a short-term lens today?
I think there's, so for background, I'm not a marketeer. I'm sort of more comms, crisis comms, that sort of area. And I think the association with trusted brands is really important for brands that are looking to build their brand, build that trust themselves. So partnerships, for instance, being a key opportunity to do that. And I think that's something that, I think some marketing teams need to be braver. is my view in it. Look at the research that we've been talking about tonight. I think the message around trusting your audience, knowing that the audience can actually see what an ad is and what the content is, and know that those are two different things, it is really important. But looking at where that trusted quality journalism is, that helps bring your brand right into it and show that you can be trusted too.
Love that. That's great. All right, Mark, coming to you next. You ready? Here we go. As someone who has worked at the epicenter of some of the UK's best known and most successful companies, Mars, HSBC, Direct Line Group, and is now an exec advisor to a diverse portfolio of clients. We're talking about that in the green room. We're basically competitors with each other, but I'm across the pond, so it's okay. You're advising companies like Stand Up to Cancer and HMRC. You've no doubt witnessed varying approaches to news. Based on what you're witnessing, how do you see the relationship between brands and advertising and quality news evolving in the next 5 years?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me here. Great to be here. I was 25 years client-side marketer and now turned portfolio coaching, advising, NED trustee. I was one of those FTSE marketers that spent billions of pounds. Hopefully some of it was okay. I think Saatchi's were in the room. Chris was here somewhere. Is Chris still here? Chris Kay was at the back. The Winston Wolfe campaign, for example. I can tell you we spent a lot on that, the Direct Line campaign. Anyway, turns out I'm going to be the contrarian in the room.
Yay.
Don't shoot the messenger. But I coach CMOs, I advise CMOs, so here we go. Reasons to be optimistic and reasons to be pessimistic. Reasons to be optimistic. Looks like we've slain the dragon around brand safety. I'll come back to that in a moment, though. Also, there's no doubt that it's a scale audience, provides great reach, probably a slightly upmarket premium audience, and it's an attention space. Great. Some reasons to be optimistic. Some reasons to be pessimistic. Don't shoot the messenger. The brand safety thing, it starts here maybe, but there's a whole education job to be done, primarily with media agencies, actually. So we're not there yet. Don't declare victory. Also, marketing has got a lot more scientific. So if we're talking about CPMs, we're talking about a language of a decade ago. It's about pure incrementality, very sophisticated econometric models. At Direct Line, we had 71 concurrent econometric models. So I could go to the CFO and tell him exactly where every pound was going and what it was achieving. So there's got to wake up to the science of marketing these days. But perhaps the biggest one, and this is where my sort of heart goes a little bit here, it kind of presupposes that marketers are rational people. To some extent they are, but hear this. The average tenure of a CMO is 18 months. They're the least trusted, least respected, least standing C-suite member. I was always very fortunate. I always reported into marketing CEOs. That helped a lot. But also, there's a stat from the Harvard Business Review which says that, sorry, this is turning out to be long. I'll make all my points in one go and then probably going to say nothing else. 80% of CEOs don't trust or aren't impressed by their CMO. 80%. Same study, only 10% of CEOs don't trust or aren't impressed by their CFO. So the CMO is marginalized, very rarely gets out of the survival zone. So let's not talk about social responsibility. And then on top, it won't have passed many people by in this audience that last week, OpenAI 01 preview jumped from 27% human reasoning to 50% in one go. And that was built on GPT-4, not GPT-5. So we're years ahead of, we're getting towards where OpenAI and GPT and Gen AI can do anything almost in an intellectual sense as well as human beings. So in this context, let's not talk about social responsibility. Because the marketer, honestly, I'm really happy that you didn't quite hit your plan, CMO, but you supported the news industry, said the CFO, never. Never. In the billions of advertising that I spent, news, if it was an explicit line item, was a subcomponent part of a subcomponent part of a subcomponent part. So you've got to know your audience, more scientific, not rational, really under the pump. You know, most marketers are running around now like, what the hell am I going to do with Gen AI? Is my function going to be commoditized? What does it mean for my talent? How do I get into producing content factories and personalization when my data estate is a shocker? So slightly, well, I don't know, not morbid, but I think you just got to be realistic about marketers are not thinking about, I need to save the day for news. I need to be really focused on my numbers, deal with this maelstrom that's around me. And in time, when the brand safety thing is done, and everyone's got that, and in time when there's more econometric modeling around the value of a brand, of news, then I think you'll be in a different space. So sorry to be, don't shoot the messenger.
You can make your 7 o'clock train now. You can go. You're done. Now, I actually want to take a moment on this because this is a vitally important point. We are experiencing the extinction of the CMO role. It's being combined with other roles, it's being eliminated, and its influence in the boardroom is absolutely waning. And a large part of it is that CMOs cannot explain the value of marketing to the growth goal of the CEO. Not media. It's not a media attribution problem. It's a marketing attribution problem. Think about that in the context how budgets are set. It's a problem for the industry. And I lived through it. I lived through it in multiple companies. The bottom line is we have to rethink how we explain the value of what we all do in this room. It's incredibly valuable. Marketing drives more than 50% of the global economy. And if we pull back on marketing because the CMO isn't there to get a budget and it's a component part of somebody else's job, you can see the next part of that. So a little bit of a shock and awe.
But I think just quickly on that, media is a big spend and we're leading to that. And I think that's what the role of the agencies is to work with the CMOs to help them understand the value and the return in investment, etc., and working with key agencies. Because you're right, you know, it's the biggest spend and it's the most complex, it's the most fast moving, and they do want to understand it. And Mark is quite unique in terms of his background and you know, the time he invested in, you know, in all the measurement side. But that's the role of the agencies, I think, in working with their CMOs.
I couldn't agree more. We need to reframe the value proposition. We also need to use the love language of the CEO and the CFO, which is growth. Everything that isn't growth is Charlie Brown's Teacher, which sounds like wah, 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 if you're familiar with the comic strip. Dan, coming to you next. You've been very patient here. I have to give you a little bit of context about why Dan is here, because it's really important to understand that. Again, I scroll with my thumb. Code and Theory has launched more than 150 newsrooms over the past decade, including most recently for global powerhouse Reuters. Earlier this year, Ad Age recognized Code and Theory as their Business Transformation Agency of the Year, and you've been recognized as one of Fast Company's Design Companies of the Year. You also work with brands who advertise in these sites, so you see both sides every day. Kamal talked about the need for innovation on the last panel on the news side, and I could not agree more with him. Where do you see opportunities for news organizations to achieve monetization through innovation and for brands to reach their desired business outcomes?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to address the last point because, you know, I was going to bring up that the average CMO only makes it 18 months, and I would say that's because they're not following the data and following the money. Like, they aren't doing their job. If you look at what Mark is actually saying, what he's saying is besides there's good social responsibility, there's actually an opportunity to get more effective advertising in a place that isn't being advertised. If you advertise on sports, for example, it's very, very expensive. But you're getting the exact same engagement on news, which is a lot less expensive. Now, one day, hopefully, that news is expensive, and that's a good thing. But right now, there's an opportunity to that. So I think CMOs should maybe actually stop following and start leading, not because of social, but because that's actually the numbers. And actually, there is an attribution to actual value that you can get from that.
So do you think it'll be called News Beach next year instead of Sport Beach in Cannes, Mark?
Well, and the other thing I just want to, the other thing I want to say is, you know, if you think about news, they're followers, and that's part of the problem. They're followers in that it's not actually the news companies that pride themselves on these humans telling stories that are actually innovating on storytelling. They don't do that. All the innovation of storytelling in the last decade has been through technology companies. And we're sitting down a barrel where that's actually happening again. So we can talk about being reactive and going, okay, we need formats on audio and formats on this and that, but that's still reactive. And the other thing I want to talk about is news brands have to be brands just like brands have to be brands. And when brands exist with meaning, it's actually important. There's a reason why Nike means something versus a commoditized shoe somewhere else. They're basically the same thing. That means something because they developed their brand. And news organizations oftentimes forget that part. So you add forgetting to be a brand, you're forgetting about innovation, which is affecting storytelling, and what are you getting? A commodity product that actually doesn't mean anything. But the best publishers, and there are really great publishers, and now we're emerging a lot new ones because of the forcing function, are actually thinking about how do I develop a brand? How does my storytelling, which is the product of my brand, actually relate to that? How do I do innovation? And that innovation is not only on storytelling, but it's on process and creation. It's not just the discipline of writing a story, it's actually creating a story that is actually the innovation, what can happen there. And I think if you add those things up, then the actual news publishers actually become the most valuable companies in the world. And the reason why they become the most valuable companies in the world is digital is all about consumption and information. And if you are a news publisher that has figured that out, you actually have a superpower that every brand in the world wants. They need to tell a story, and they need to distribute that story. And when they distribute that story, they need engagement. And if you're able to figure that out, you are the best influencer in the world. You are the creator. We talk about influencer and creator economies. That should be news brands. They are the that's what they do. They influence and they create content. So I think that story gets lost, and that story in converting it to actually selling to advertisers get lost. And the ones that can do that are the ones that are going to win. So I'll just throw that out there.
Do you think we hit a nerve with Dan? I mean,
well, I just think that
don't candy coat it. What are you really thinking?
I just think that if you're going to be a follower, it doesn't work in advertising and it doesn't work in news. And if you're going to be a leader, that's what works. That's how you find differentiation. Being a brand advertising is not so different than being a brand as a publisher. The product and service may be different, but at the end of the day, you're developing a brand that creates meaning, that gives value.
Amen. Amen. All right, Tina, coming back to you now. We know that a key personal focus of yours is your advocacy for the Conscious Advertising Network. In relation to that, do you think there can be an introduction to adapted metrics or KPIs when evaluating the value of advertising and quality news platforms to other media channels? How can we advance the conversation to what we need to be measuring?
I mean, in an ideal world, it would be nice. But I think for me, it's when I look at any sort of scoring sheet in pitches I run for clients, it's up there with sustainability, it's up there with D&I. There's so many, and Mark and I have discussed this many times about there's so many other priorities for marketeers. They have got pressure. There is pressure on the budget. There is an oversupply market of agencies, et cetera, et cetera. It's a tough market. So ideally, yes, I think it would be great to have a KPI, in terms of, is it, brand safety or investment in news or, increase in trust, et cetera. But I think there are so many other priorities that marketers, when they're looking at their media spend, have to focus on. It's not there yet. I mean, like sustainability and D&I, you would think, it's much, obviously D&I in the States is much higher than it is over here in Europe, where sustainability is. And often in scoring sheets for agency selection, etc., it's not even 5%. So I would like it to be, and I think it will be, I think on the investment in news side, but for me, it's also about the sustainability, diversity, modern slavery, all these issues. It's so much for marketeers, modern marketeers to comprehend. It's a lot. So it'd be nice too, but I think we're way off it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would just add, though, there are some non-monetary metrics like reputation is changing for the better, et cetera, that might come from leveraging trusted news audiences. If we can move the conversation beyond our OAS, which I think is a false god for so many. We were getting the time sign, so I'm going to kind of accelerate here. And at the risk of going long again, Mark, I'm coming back to you. As advertisers' relationships with their consumers are becoming increasingly personalized, what creative approaches do you think marketers can use to develop content that resonates with news audience, excuse me?
Yeah, so I'm just going to throw another hand grenade in. So I'm an advisor at Nottingham University. They are thinking about Gen AI. And they did a survey, all undergraduates, postgraduates. Do you use Gen AI for your studies? 95% yes, it was anonymous. 95% yes, first conclusion, 5% were liars. After that, it changed the philosophy completely around, so what's our role here as an education institution? Do we push water uphill? Do we put our head in the sand? Or do we run towards it? And I think they're moving towards the run towards it. All the advisory group are saying, run towards it. So what, if you have that philosophy for journalism, what does Gen AI bring? I mean, marketers are out there now thinking about how do I personalize down to one, with millions and millions of iterations of copy and content factories and so on. So, and then I look at the current feeds. I mean, like, what have the BBC done? Sorry, I don't want to offend too many people in the room. I've probably offended everybody, but like, what's happened to the BBC app? The design formats of many news brands need work. And so if you really raced into this, and you'd give marketers opportunities to deeper partnerships, more personalized, but what's the big question for me is genuinely, what does Gen AI mean for news journalism? I think that's a bigger question than what marketers do for it.
I think it's the best thing ever for news journalism. That's what it is. I think it forces, first of all, I just want to say one potential prediction, that social media and traditional brands get solved because of fake news, meaning there is going to be an inflection point where there's more fake content out there, where actually I don't think they'll care whether a human wrote it or not. They'll just care whether it could be meaningful or not. And there could be a point where we tip over, where you can, and then every newsroom has a problem with resources and doing more stuff. This is a gift for the content creator world. It's a literal gift where pressures, whether you're an advertiser and your budgets are shrinking to create more opportunity, or whether you're a news publisher and you need to create more content, this is the biggest gift to the world, to say you can do more with less. And I think if it's used correctly, there's a moment of opportunity there. If it's used not incorrectly, then, it's not a layup just because the technology exists. You have the entitlement to do it correctly. That's actually hard work. That actually takes time and it takes thinking. But if you do it correctly, it's a huge gift.
I'm not sure I'd agree with I'd prefer a machine to write the copy than the human being, because ultimately I think that is the trust bit. There may well be an inflection point there, but I think people will go to that sort of trusted human source, and actually people will seek that more. Look at Tortoise, look at that slow news. But I also think in terms of the sort of design of apps, how many people have looked at local newspaper websites on your phone and it's constantly scrolling to the top and ads are just jumping out and you can't read the story? Look at national newspaper websites, they do the same. And I think there's a real point there that if you look at the technology and what's working, it's good design, right? And that's where the investment needs to be in terms of future
I'd agree with that.
Publications.
Yeah, in the interest of time, we're now getting the 3 minutes mark. I think that the answer exists in the middle. And what I mean by that, nothing is ever going to replace boots on the ground, talking to soldiers in the trench in Ukraine, saying, how's it going, right? But what we heard in the previous panel, I think James and Kamal made the point, I might be wrong, was that explainer content matters, right? Sometimes explainer content has to be editorial because it's, subjective. Other times that content can actually be done by AI and lightly edited and help you get speed to market, right? So I think there are specific use cases where AI is a tool in a box of tools, but I don't think it's going to ever replace quality journalism for all but the least interested people who are, not really, very discerning. Mark, I see you rising. Do you want to make a point in the 2 minutes we have left, or are you?
No, I'm the 1 minute after you.
Oh, okay, good. All right, so at the risk of getting another provocative answer, the next question and last one, it has to be, unfortunately, Dan. As you know, Meredith Kopit-Levien, who is the CEO of the New York Times, is fond of saying is the news, right? We've heard her say that a lot. When you think about your vision for Code and Theory, for the role of cultural relevance specifically, and what you are architecting in the modern newsroom, which is kind of a unique role for, agents. I grew up a client my entire career. I would never even think of an agency designing the physical workspace, and that's fascinating to me. The speed of culture and how fast news consumes its audience. Is this fertile territory? And I think I know what your answer is going to be for the marketer's job now, which is to engineer relevance in every interaction. And what I mean by that specifically is stop producing one-size-fits-all ads, stop pushing out one new piece of content every other day, but actually figure out how to attach your story, which may change from the story that you woke up thinking about to whatever happened in the culture this morning. And can marketers get there with governance and approval and all the other shite that we foist on an agency?
I think to some extent they do that now at the speed of culture of social media. But I think that is a commodity play, and it's you're beholden to other platform algorithms. So I think that is the uniqueness of working with a publisher or a news publisher, in that actually you have access to do something in many different ways. It's not a singular format with a singular algorithm with just an audience that doesn't actually have relevance other than the audience. That is uniquely news. That is a uniquely publisher proposition. And additionally, news are the experts, the ultimate experts, as I said before, the ultimate influencer, the ultimate creator of the creator economy. They are uniquely positioned to do that. So as a brand where that is actually important, where you need to create relevance and culture to create engagement, there's no better place than news. You want to talk about numbers, you will see numbers work if that is done in a correct way and not a generic way. And that's important. It has to be done in a correct way.
Thank you very much. We have 4 more questions and 0 more minutes, so we're going to have to end it there. Please give it up for our panelists today, Ross, Dan, Mark, and Tina.